Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin Reville with our From the Vault series featuring unique and historical firearms, presented by 2FC Tactical right here in New Prague, Minnesota, and we're excited to bring you all these guns. Today we have a really special gun for you, and I do hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe and continue to support us through that effort or either our Patreon channel as we continue to grow and expand our offerings to you guys as we're branching out to even more things here in the very near future, including a review channel. So please check us out, and I hope you enjoy our shorts as well. We have a lot of fun making those. With that being said, today we have the FN High Power. This comes with the holster. This is a German-occupied version of this gun. It's the creme de la creme made by FN Herstal. And if I can get the camera to pick it up, it's pretty faint, it's a little worn, but you can see the German proof marks right there. This one's from 1942. So the High Power has kind of become synonymous with John Moses Browning. This is the last design he would do. He would eventually pass away in 1921, and this was his final design. The sad thing is this would not go into production in his lifetime. And I'm going to say something that sounds really weird. This was done in response to the request from the French to update their sidearms. Believe it or not, the French were actually well ahead of their time and one of the premier gun makers at the time. Early 1900s we're talking, all the way up through the 1930s. They really were very far advanced compared to where the rest of the world was. Despite their reputation and when it comes to winning wars, they actually did produce quite good, quite well-designed guns, I should say. But they were looking for an upgrade in World War I to their sidearm. They had some criteria. One of the ones was it was a minimum of a 10-round magazine. Well, Browning went to work on it, and like I said, unfortunately, he passed away before it was fully fleshed out. Excuse me there. But the High Power would end up with a 13-round magazine. It's chambered in 9mm, very similar to the P38 and Luger rounds. Taking a round that had been invented and already existed at the time. FN was a natural, which is a natural production point for Browning because he had already moved his designs and gun making over there in the early 1900s. The French were very well aware of Browning and his designs because in World War I, he obviously changed the machine gun game with his air-cooled barrels, and obviously the 1911, the years before the war, as well as the 1903 pocket pistol, the 45 ACP caliber, the 50 BMG caliber, and all the other things that Browning would go on to do. I mean, the list is forever long, and we probably should do a video just on John Moses Browning at some point. But the High Power would not go into production until 1935. And this was done while, yes, the French were interested in World War I, they had, by the time the war ended, very little money and really decided not to pursue the project anymore. They leaned heavily into what they had, plus the Maginot Line as their defense buffer against Germany, and they didn't really pursue this design. FN, though, however, thought that there was something here. So at the time when Browning left, they looked at a 10-round magazine. It had to have, you know, magazine disconnectors and all this stuff. So they took kind of the 1911 platform that he was working on and designed this into what would be known as the 609 pistol. The High Power pistol, the High Power designation would not actually come until the Ingles factory production in Canada after the war. So they produced these. Now this, again, it does look a lot like a 1911. It does feature a larger hammer, but in terms of the overall look, where the safety is located, how the safety works, where the slide catch is and how it works, the magazine release, all very 1911, even the grip angle, very 1911. There is a little bit of a difference here in terms of the overall profile, where the 1911 obviously doesn't necessarily have this extreme bevel here on the slide. In terms of pop culture, Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark very briefly uses one of these when he's in Nepal, going after Marion. Despite the fact, given when this was produced and when that movie happens, it's very close. The odds of them having one of these is virtually none. That movie takes place in 1936. These were produced in 1935. Nazi Germany wouldn't occupy Belgium until the 1939, 1940. Excuse me, 1940, yeah. So therefore, they probably would not have had one of these when that movie was going on. But obviously, the filmmaker Steven Spielberg was going for period correct or period like weapons that Germany would have used. They did use these, obviously, in World War II. These are produced still to this day, and there's many copies and variants. You'll see Gearson do it. You'll see, well, we'll talk about Karine here in a bit. But when it comes to World War II, I actually think this is the best handgun of World War II. It's highly sought after by collectors for various reasons. It is the double-stacked, the only double-stacked sidearm of World War II in 9mm, which would be the standard issue sidearm caliber to this day. Double stacked is a feature that is in all modern pistols. This was so far ahead of its time, and you got to think he was working on this back in 1914, 1915. The design wasn't fully flushed out, sure, by the time of his passing, but what he left behind was a legacy, again, that was already cemented, but one final swan song, if you will. FN would take this design and produce it and start giving it out to its military members. Very similar to the P-35 in Poland, or excuse me, the Viz-35 in Poland. I keep doing that, and I did that in that video too. This has a designation of a P-35 at times. That's why I get the two confused. Very sorry about that. But the Radom Viz-35 would also impress the German hierarchy, and they would implement that into their arsenal. So would the high power. With its 13-round magazine, I mean, the amount of firepower this handgun had was, 5-6 rounds more than a lot of the issued guns of the time. So it definitely gave you a great fire superiority for your sidearm advantage over your opponent. In terms of takedown, greatly simplified for the 1911. You're not doing the barrel lock anymore up here. It takes down very similar to a modern pistol, where you just pop out the slide catch, very much like a 1911, but also again, it's a lot more simplified than the 1911 design for takedown. Very ergonomical. Love this gun. In fact, this is one of my favorite guns. The Browning High Power, of course, is also used by the Axel Foley and the Beverly Hillcops series, featuring, again, the wood grips that would be featured throughout the life of this pistol. Modern equivalents of this would be like this Karine, which is a Israeli copy of the High Power. This would have been done in the 1980s. Again, it's the same gun. It's a direct ripoff of this one. Now, unfortunately for Israel, they had a real problem trying to get guns, and they still do. A lot of countries won't sell them firearms for various reasons, whether it be political or anti-Semitic. It leans more into the anti-Semitic in this particular time frame. And we won't get into the Israelis and my thoughts on it, because I have very strong opinions on Israel and very pro-Israel, broadly speaking. With that being said, the Karine was a excellent weapon platform because it was a Browning High Power. There's no difference between the gun. It just has to be where it was made. They really liked it. Had trouble getting them from FN. Now you got to remember, FN owns all Browning's patents at the time. Now, while there is Browning USA, it is still affiliated with FN to this day, and they could not get licensed copies, so they ended up making it on their own. Very fortunate to have that in my personal collection. This one did come with its holster, which is really cool to have the complete collection here. It did come with 2 magazines. Both are Waffen stamped, so these are 2 Nazi high-power magazines. They do feature metal followers, whereas the Karine is more unlined with the Modern Life, or at least the one that I have. The magazine I have has a plastic follower in it. So that would be the differences in the magazines. Now, in terms of the magazines, these work in both guns. So I can put the 1942 magazine in the 1980s gun and vice versa. So nothing was changed really, other than the grips are plastic versus wood, and it's more polished and blued versus parkerized, so on and so forth. We're talking cosmetic features. The holster would allow you to carry a spare magazine in the holster itself, and it has this very over-the-top, I should say, flap. So, in line with the holsters of the time, the 1911 holster is extremely similar to this, so not a huge departure. Not surprising, given that the 1911 and this obviously have a very close history to one another, mainly being its father is the same. But the high power would go on to serve the Germans all the way throughout the end of the war. In fact, they really highly sought after these. There wasn't that many of them available. And that really is the main reason why this wasn't chosen as the standard issue sidearm. I mean, one, the P-38 had gone into production in 1939 and was ramped up fully. Even though this was designed in 1935, it wasn't being produced on the numbers that the P-38 was. Also, for the fact that Belgium is a lot closer to England, which is where all the bombing runs were coming out of. As we bombed, Germany and France and the German positions, I should say, in France and so on and so forth, as we tried to attack their industrial production zones. It means that the factory for these was not as well protected. Where bombers had a limited range, they had a harder time reaching farther into Germany than they did, say, Belgium, which was not far from the coast. That's really where this ends up running into problems. It's not necessarily in the gun itself, it's in the availability. With that being said, if you're a collector, you want one of these, they are pricey. That is the downside. These are the guns that you want to find if you're in the World War II collection. And then the pop culture references for these guns is limitless. You'll see them obviously in video games, but like I said, the Beverly Hills Cop, the Indiana Jones series, so on and so forth, they pop up quite a bit. I do hope you enjoyed this video and you'll keep tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe. Like I said before, we're growing rapidly and we have all of you to thank for that. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you.